Today in the media conference with Goel, please mute, please mute. Today on the media conference with Goel, which is brought to you by V4NEWS, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon Se, Samvad Saroka News, Bharat Post News, Organ Donation India Foundation and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today's topic is not only current, but burning topic, and that is the reviving Indian economy. The economy of India is characterized as a middle-income developing market economy. It is the world's sixth largest economy by nominal GDP and the third largest by purchasing power by PPP. According to the International Monetary Fund (IMF), on a per capita income basis, India ranked 145th by GDP nominal and 122nd by GDP PPP. From independence in 1947 until 1991, successive governments promoted protectionist economic policies with extensive state intervention and economic regulation, which is characterized as delirium in the form of license Raj. The end of the Cold War and an acute balance of payment crisis in 1991 led to the adoption of a broad economic liberalization in India. Since the start of the 21st century, annual average GDP growth has been 6% to 7%, and from 2013 to 2018, India was the world's fastest growing major economy, surpassing China. Historically, India was the largest economy in the world for most of the 2 millennia from the 1st until the 19th century. The long-term growth perspective of the Indian economy remains positive due to its young population and corresponding low dependency ratio, healthy savings and the investment rates, increasing globalization in India and integration into the global economy. The economy slowed in 2017 due to the shocks of demonetization in 2016 and the introduction of the goods and service tax in 2017. Nearly 60% of the India's GDP is driven by domestic private consumption and continues to remain the world's sixth largest consumer market. Apart from private consumption, India's GDP is also fueled by government spending, investment, and exports. In 2019, India was the world's 9th largest importer and the 12th largest exporter. India has been a member of the World Trade Organization since 1st January 1995. It ranked 63rd on the Ease of Doing Business Index and 68 on the Global Competitiveness Report. With 500 million workers, the Indian labor force is the world's second largest as of 2019. India has one of the world's highest number of billionaires and extreme income inequality. Since India has a vast informal economy, barely 2% of Indians pay income taxes. During the 2008 global financial crisis, the economy faced a mild slowdown. India undertook stimulus measures, both physical and monetary, to boost growth and generate demand. In subsequent years, economic growth revived. According to the 2017 PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC report, India's GDP at purchasing power parity could overtake that of United States by 2050. According to World Bank, to achieve sustainable economic development, India must focus on public sector reform, infrastructure, agricultural and rural development, removal of land and labor regulations, financial inclusion, spur private investment, and exports, education, and public health. In 2020, India's 10 largest trading partners were the United States, China, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Germany, Hong Kong, Indonesia, South Korea, and Malaysia. In 2019-20, the foreign direct investment FDI in India was $74.4 billion, with the service sector, computer and telecom industry remains leading sectors for FDI inflows. India has free trade agreements with several nations, including ASEAN, SAFTA, Mercosur, South Korea, Japan, and several others which are in effect or other negotiating stage. The service sector makes up 50% of GDP and remains the fastest growing sector, while the industrial sector and the agricultural sector employs the majority of the labor force. The Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange are some of the world's largest stock exchanges by market capitalization. India is the world's sixth largest manufacturer, representing 3% of global manufacturing output and employs over 57 million people. Nearly 66% of India's population is rural and contributes about 50% of India's GDP. It has the world's fourth largest foreign exchange reserves worth $585 billion. India has a high public debt with 86% of GDP, while its fiscal deficit stood at 9.5% of GDP. India's government-owned banks faced mounting bad debt, resulting in low credit growth. Simultaneously, the NBFC sector has been engulfed in a liquidity crisis. India faces moderate unemployment, rising income inequality, and a drop in aggregate demand. India's gross domestic savings rate stood at 30.1% of GDP in financial year 2019. In recent years, independent economists and financial institutions have accused the government of fudging various economic data, especially GDP growth. India is the world's largest manufacturer of generic drugs, and its pharmaceutical sector fulfills over 50% of the global demand for vaccines. The Indian IT industry is a major exporter of IT services with $191 billion in revenue and employs over 4 million people. India's chemical industry is extremely diversified and estimated at $178 billion. The tourism industry contributes about 9.2% of the India's GDP and employs over 42 million. India ranks second globally in food and agricultural production, while agricultural exports were $35.09 billion. The construction and real estate sector ranks third among the 14 major sectors in terms of direct, indirect, and induced effects in all sectors of the economy. The Indian textiles industry is estimated at $100 billion and contributes 13% of the industrial output and 2.3% of India's GDP, while employs over 45 million people directly. India's telecommunication industry is the world's second largest by the number of mobile phones, smartphones, and internet users. It is the world's 25th largest oil producer and the third largest oil consumer. The Indian automobile industry is the world's fifth largest by production. It has $1.17 trillion worth of retail market, which contributes over 10% of India's GDP and has one of the world's fastest growing e-commerce markets. India has the world's fourth largest natural resources, with the mining sector contributing 11% of the country's industrial GDP and 2.5% of total GDP. It is also the world's second largest coal producer, the second largest cement producer, the second largest steel producer, and the third largest electricity producer. During the COVID-19 pandemic, numerous rating agencies downgraded India's GDP predictions for financial year 21 to negative figures, signaling a recession in India, the most severe since 1979. According to a Dun and Bradstreet report, the country is likely to suffer a recession in the third quarter of financial year 2020 as a result of over 2 months long nationwide lockdown imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. Corruption has been a pervasive problem in India. A 2005 study by Transparency International (TI) found that more than half of those surveyed had first-hand experience of paying a bribe or peddling influence to get a job done in a public office in the previous year. A follow-up study in 2008 found that this rate to be 40%. In 2011, uh, 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 TI ranked India at 95th place among 183 countries in perceived levels of public sector corruption. By 2016, India saw a reduction in corruption and its ranking improved to 79th place. In 1996, red tape bureaucracy and the license Raj were suggested as a cause for the institutionalized corruption and inefficiency. More recent reports suggest the causes of corruption includes excessive regulations and approval requirements, mandated spending programs, monopoly of certain goods and services provided by government-controlled institutions, bureaucracy with discretionary powers, and lack of transparent laws and processes. The economy requires a very big demand push for growth recovery. And to discuss this very, very hot, burning, and relevant topic that is reviving Indian economy, we have financial wizards, those who are well experienced, and those who are authority in this field, panelist with me. And I would like to invite my first panelist, and he is Dr. M. Narendra. Dr. M. Narendra is the former chairman and managing director of Indian Overseas Bank. Dr. M. Narendra started his banking career when he joined Corporation Bank as a training officer in January 1975. In Corporation Bank, his hard work and dedication earned him the recognition of being a member of Chairman's Club for 8 years in a row and 18 more years. He joined Bank of India as Executive Director in November 2008. While he was with Bank of India, the bank won many awards. Dr. M. Narendra joined Indian Overseas Bank as the Chairman and Managing Director on 1st November 2010 and retired on subordination on 31st July 2014. Some of the prominent awards he won for Indian Overseas Bank are National Award for Excellence in MSc Lending for the year 2010-11, National Award for Excellence in MSc Lending for 2011-12, National Award for Outstanding Performance in Implementation of PMEGP in South Zone for 2011-12, the Sunday Standard Best Bankers Award 2013, IBA Banking Technology Award 2012-13, Best Use of Business Intelligence, National Award for Effective Implementation of PMEGP in South Zone for 2012-13. During his tenure, Indian Overseas Bank stood number 1 in sale of LIC products of Life Insurance Corporations of India for 3 consecutive years. He is currently associated as director with Mahindra Rural Housing Finance Limited, Mahindra First Choice Wheels Limited, Adani Enterprises Limited, Viswat Chemicals Limited, Kesar Enterprises Limited, Vanprastha Ashram, Man Industries India Limited. Welcome, Dr. M. Narendra, on our show. Dr. M. Narendra, you have heard what I mentioned about the condition of Indian economy. And we all know, due to the pandemic, COVID pandemic, the Indian economy, which was doing one of the best in the world, fastest growing, has suffered a very bad setback. And that's why now the condition, Indian economic condition, is not at all good. And to revive it is lots of challenges are there. So we would like to know from you the reviving Indian economy. Dr. M. Narendra, please.
Good morning and thank you, Lal Goel ji. The way in which you covered the subject with the various facts and figures, and that too not only at the current moment, from the background also, really, really appreciable. And I must also congratulate you that consistently last 18 months, you have been bringing a lot of speakers to this forum, and now both in the morning and evening. And I'm very pleased to be a part of your this program and event. And I'm also grateful to you for covering myself in terms of some of the achievements. I am greatly humbled. And as far as the Indian economy is concerned, as you rightly said, the world looks at India for reaching the what you call the GDP growth. Currently, this year, in spite of all that, the World Bank estimates that the world output or world growth may be around 6%. And for various purposes, in terms of, as you said, consumption story, or the opportunities for investment in India, and the open policy which India has been maintaining, attracting a lot of foreign institutional investment as well as foreign direct investment. And with a lot of changes done by under our current Prime Minister in terms of opening up the sectors, maybe even sometimes up to 100%, and the ease of doing business, and most of the things getting under the transparent mode. This is also a very important plus factor for positioning of India in the international trade. And as you rightly pointed out, we have some of the exclusive agreement of trade with the various countries, and we have also partly some of the regional blocks in terms of the foreign trade, including our neighboring China, that we have a substantial trade. And of course, there have been a deficit from their side to us, in the sense they are yet to import fully, but that process also improving. So one area goes up that this year, one important point which is coming very much is Indian exports are showing substantial growth, particularly in the current year. And now up to latest maybe June or July, we have already covered around 130 billion US dollars of exports. And that means around 35 billion of US dollars per month. And even the service export is more than 55 billion US dollars. So this trend, if it is continued, recently our Prime Minister also addressed all the embassy officers as well as our various trade association, particularly from the export side. And India, even though has kept a target of 400 billion US dollars of exports, it is likely that India may cross 600 billion of that exports in the current year, because elsewhere, US, Europe, and all of them are bubbling with the economic activity. So the demand for our various engineering, chemicals, or pharmaceuticals, as well as gem and jewelry and other products are getting very good momentum. Only thing is, India has to widen the basket of its product for export. That is where the agriculture also plays a very important role, and our Prime Minister has been giving a lot of importance for agriculture related exports, other than the traditional like pulses, rice, and all other food products, as well as fruits processing, and such other products, herbal products from the rural areas. These can also find very good importance in the trade. So one is on the foreign trade. And at the same time, India has now enhanced its imports also. In the last 1 year, during the COVID period, imports were reduced. And that was looked at like, we are substituting the imports from our internal other products. But for a consequence increase in the exports, you need to import also the capital goods and some of the raw material available elsewhere. We have to import. And in the latest data, the imports have also gone up. And that's where, if we had a current account, what you call surplus, it is not a fair indication of growth in export market. So earlier we had around 200 basis or around 2%, 3% surplus. That was a temporary. Today that position is of course reversed, because the oil exports also, or exports, the oil imports, the cost has gone up. But other than oil also, the imports are better. So this is one side. And as you rightly said, India is the destination for FDI. Last year, there was around 83 billion of US dollars of FDI coming to India. And of course, maybe a few sectors received higher FDI. And even in the current year, 10.5 billion US dollars of what you call FDI has come. I was just seeing one president of some India US strategic relationship, one organization. He is mentioning that India has to get 100 billion US dollars of FDI every year if India has to reach 5 trillion of US economy, Indian economy, as envisaged by our Prime Minister. We are currently at 2.7 billion, which has to go to 5 trillion. Now, as far as the Indian growth rate is concerned, that is primarily that even before the COVID, which you gave the reason on GST and demonetization, Indian growth has come to last quarter of 1920, it was 1.6. And over and above that, we had a 7.5% contraction in the 2021. And it is now expected, even though we had a very, what you call V-shaped recovery and all, but unfortunately, due to the second wave, which they never expected, and another fear of third wave, which is likely, or because globally it is already the Delta, whatever 2 or whatever, it's already around 130 countries, and most of the cases now coming in COVID is from this particular virus. So if that doesn't result in any lockdown or major difficulty, the resilience of the Indian manufacturing has to be appreciated. And from a low level of 35 PMI, whatever that index, now it has come to more than 55, 56. So that anything above 50 is a good indication of positivity. And our manufacturing has, even in spite of this, because quite particularly from the essentials and other requirements, the PMI has come back. It is only in consumer sector that it is still hovering around 45, 46, which has to also to go up. And that is understandable because entire tourism, hospitality, or even, of course, other professional services, trade, commerce, and all that has got affected due to the continuous, first was the major lockdown, and this year partial lockdown. That only now started opening up. So if they had come up, as well as, of course, Indian IT industry has to play in global area in terms of its supremacy and with the innovation, and get to make a large, what you call, exports, which will contribute to that. So one is external demand is good. Now, as you rightly said, the private consumption got substantially affected in the last year and this year. Now, when externally they were looking India as the consumption base, we are not able to activize. Primarily, even though the rural income has been very good in a way that around 4% agriculture growth continuously has been doing, and this year also the monsoon has been reasonably good and well distributed, and still, of course, we have to catch up with the monsoon, still some. So the your kharif cropping would have gone up, and it is to become full-fledged. And if the rural whatever earlier crops also were good in terms of the production, so the rural economy is having good amount of work, as well as this their agriculture is contributing continuously to our production. In fact, in the 2021, it is only the agriculture sector which was positive in contribution. So once that revives, but for the fact that because during this, they don't want to spend much money, money is being kept saving for the any fear of COVID and all, and the discretionary spending is not coming. That is where the consumption full revival. Now maybe 55, 56% of our GDP through is private consumption. But I can guarantee that consumption is improving now, and it is coming to normalcy. And in that count, we will see substantial pent-up demand also is there. That recovery is already started. And this year, it is expected, including RBI, has estimated that our GDP will be 9.5. Yesterday also, day for yesterday, they maintained that growth rate of 9.5. Other agencies which had earlier 12 and all, they have now revised to 9.5. This is the looks like the 9.5 as the GDP growth. Now, another important is private investment, which is the another driver of our GDP. And it is quite a long time, as you rightly said. Once the Indian GDP went up to average 8.5, and during that period there is a bullish feel, and lot of investment went to what you call infrastructure, and lot of investment by the private sector went into what you call acquisition, merger, as well as they even globally they acquired a lot of firms. So the Indian GDP went into a higher mode, and that's where the average was 8.5% that time. From that level, we got down, maybe a revised GDP calculation also. The average GDP may be 6.5 to 7%. And now, currently, the GDP estimated for this year, as I mentioned, 9.5. But even by 2025, we may not be beyond 6.5% GDP. So the private investment phase has come down. And during the COVID, all the corporates raised a lot of money. Like, last year, 1920, they raised 10 lakh crores. 2021, they raised another 10.5 lakhs crores. And in the current year also, 8.5 lakh crores by way of equity and bond market, thanks to RBI pumping in 12 lakh crores of liquidity and bringing the interest rates by 115 basis points. Today, the corporates are much better position, particularly which are rated well, and they have paid back the loan to the bank, and they're assessing the bank credit has come down. They are more on the market related, and this has resulted in the corporate credit as a percentage of credit has also come down in the bank, and the bank credit to the corporate is negative. So this is another factor which is also affecting the growth rate, because the credit to GDP ratio in terms of the India, it is around 50 to 60%. Globally, it is even 130%. So India, we have to cross 100 mark. So the complaint is that the banks are not lending, banks are no risk averse and all. But at a time when the banks lend, they are also told that you are aggressive in lending. And as you rightly said, you pointed out that a lot of NPAs arise in the infrastructure and all. But one thing I must appreciate, that the coming back to the bank, I will come back, but the government continue to spend, both the state government and central government, even during the COVID. Other than the revenue expenditure on the CapEx front, they spent a lot of money. And in this year budget, they have estimated 5,54,000 crores of CapEx, which is much higher than the last year also. Last year also around 4.5 lakh crores. So the whole focus is on CapEx, whether it is railway, whether it's infrastructure, road, or in terms of other physical infrastructure or urban development, or even in health sector. The capex is suppose if that amount is spent, and other side there is a national infrastructure pipeline of 111 lakh crores in the next 5 years, on an average 20 lakh crores spending, which envisage around 30% or maybe more private investment also, other than 40% by the government. And here in this particular infrastructure, we need continuous international fund coming so as to achieve. That is around 100 billion, which earlier I said. So once the infrastructure gets picked up, like road sector has been doing still well, and railway also started spending. And as you rightly said, mining also started auctioning, and the government also has opened up the defense sector as per the Atmanirbhar Bharat. If I say, so almost all major transformational changes were done during the Atmanirbhar Bharat, even though physical spending may be 1.5, 2 or 3% of the GDP, but overall it was around 29 lakh 70,000 crores, including RBI 12 lakh crores. And over and above that, there is Atmanirbhar recently also exclusively for health sector and all. And under the emergency line credit scheme, more than earlier 3 lakh crores, which are already almost lent, and another 1.5 lakh crores. So overall, the government has been positive. Maybe there is some feeling that, including, of course, Narega, they spent more than 1,10,000 crores. And this year also, the demand for Narega is more. And the digital also, UPI is highest transaction, more than, I think, volume is 6 lakh crores. And the transaction is also around 232 crores or 324 crores. So in all respect, we are poised for revival, and currently all the indication of revival is seen. And as for the NPA also, the banks have completely covered the most of the NPAs, and the coverage ratio has even gone up to 70 to 80%. And they have started in the last 2 quarters positive profit. And in fact, the profitability of the public sector bank also have been very good. And the recovery, for the sake of data, under the CARP, they have recovered around 39-40%, and on the surface around 20%. So overall, the recovery is also more than 5 to 6 lakh crores in the last 5 years. So currently the banks are fully financially resilient, and with the capital adequacy of 16%, and they are poised for extending credit, and likely that this year the credit growth may go up to 10%. Then our Indian economy will come back. I know the constraints of time. With this, I give the forum to Goel Sab, that we can give a little confidence to you and our readers and all, that Indian economy, thanks to the initiative of the government and to the people enterprising nature, one area or another, these startups have started mopping up a lot of money. And that is around 55,000 number of startups already approved by the government. And in fact, they are now coming to the IPO, where they are getting a good valuation. So that is also likely to contribute to the Indian and global trade by us. And our startups are very, very imaginative and innovative. With this, I am hopeful that India and the revival of Indian economy will be on the positive side. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagin, for giving this very, very positive aspect of the Indian economy. And what he says, I would just like to highlight few of the things. He says the Indian exports is increasing like anything. Like in this year only, we already touched 130 billion US dollar, and he says the expectation is about 600 billion dollar, although the government earlier put a target of about 400 billion dollar. But he says because of the many our exports, including even the agriculture exports, and our honorable Prime Minister's emphasis on the agriculture products has not only given the good revenue for the agriculturist, but also for the exports. He says the imports were reduced during the pandemic, but afterwards now the import has to increase because of the oil prices as well as other things which we are depending on them. But he says the FDI is very, very comfortable this year. Already $10.5 billion has already come. And he expects that the rural income is going to be very good this year, which has been shown during the pandemic also, how the rural economy has supported the Indian economy. And he says the RBI is expecting 9.5% GDP growth, which is quite good in this particular circumstances. And he says that the way the things are moving, even in the stock markets and all other things, the corporates are raising the funds. That is also shows a very, very positive sign of the economy. And government is spending, state government as well as the central government is spending, and their main emphasis is on capex. And that is very important, because if we will develop the infrastructure, definitely it will be not only giving the employment, but also doing very good for the future for our industries and for everyone. And he says the Atmanirbhar Bharat is a game changer in one way, because it has given very much boost to our defense as well as health manufacturing activities, because now those things which we are depending for the imports from other countries, now we are doing it in our India only. And he says he is very sure that we are poised to revive our economy very soon. He has also mentioned about the banking industry, because he's very closely associated with the banks. He says the NPA is almost down, covered by the banks, and the banks are in a very, very good position, because the big corporates have cleared their earlier debts, and now the banks are in very comfortable position, and they are ready to give the loans to the public as well as to industries. And he has also given a credit to startups. He says they are doing well, and now startups have started coming for the IPOs, which is getting a good momentum for increasing our getting a boost to the economy. And he is very sure with these all measures, the 2024 or 25, we will be having the 5 trillion economy as envisaged by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. Thank you very much, Dr. M. Naren, for giving such a positive aspect, because today, whenever we talk, everybody thinks that the condition of the Indian economy is in a very bad shape. But you being a authority, you know the ins and outs, and being such a financial wizard, you have given a clear picture. I'm sure our viewers get a fair idea what is the condition of the Indian economy. Thank you very much once again, Dr. M. Naren, for giving your views. Now, I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Mr. R. Kannan. Mr. R. Kannan is the corporate advisor and keynote speaker. He is ex-TCS, ICICI Bank, and Hinduja Group. Mr. R. Kannan is an expert in finance and strategy with more than 35 years experience, and during his career as management consultant and as a keen member of corporate headquarters in various corporates, including TCS and PwC as management consultant, Hinduja Group as VP and head of the strategy, ICICI Infotech as EVP and head of the strategy, ICICI Bank Group as EVP strategy. He carried out assignments relating to corporate finance, fundraising, treasury management, strategy formulation and implementation, organization restructuring, corporate performance management, business development, and mergers and acquisitions. In his last role, he was heading the corporate performance monitoring and research function at the group level in Hinduja Group, dealing in aspects relating to planning, budgeting, performance monitoring, business development, M&A, and global economic and industry research. He is a member of expert committees in FICCI, CII, Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Indian Merchant Chamber on committees relating to private equity, industry, economy, banking, transportation, and environment. He is a member of National Task Force on Artificial Intelligence of CII. He had attended programs organized by World Bank, International Institute of Finance, Asian Development Bank, AIIB on international finance. He was in the jury of selecting best CFOs in India. He was a member on the board of studies of SIES School of Management for 5 years, and presently the member of Academic Advisory Council in Birla Institute of Management Technology, Greater Noida, and Foxen School of Management, Hyderabad. He was the president of 75-year-old Bombay Tamil Sangam for 3 years. He is a visiting faculty in leading management institutes on finance, strategy, organization, restructuring, and turnaround management. He has a personal interest in global and Indian economy and shared his ideas on economic development and economic crisis with the government stakeholders from across the world, and some of the recommendations on crisis resolution and economic development were implemented by the government authorities across the world and Indian government. He has received several awards from different organizations. Welcome, Mr. R. Kannan, on our show. Mr. R. Kannan, you have heard what Dr. M. Narendra has spoken, and he has mentioned very, very clearly that he is very positive, and he has given all the data which clearly indicates that Indian economy is reviving in a very, very fast and unexpected way, because people were not expecting that the Indian economy can revive like this. So we would like to know your views now on reviving Indian economy. Mr. R. Kannan, please.
Thank you, Sri Goel, for this opportunity. I'm happy to be in your program for the third time. And the introduction by you and followed by the practical aspects of economy by Dr. Narendra, that has really given a very good backdrop. So I'll not elaborate. One thing that when you talk about revival, like both of you said, India has got a lot of strengths. And if you ask any analyst in the world, you yourself said that Pricewaterhouse has predicted that 2050, India will overtake US also. So that is what is even leading institutions like IMF and World Bank, even though it's a short blip right now, what we are going through, thanks to COVID. So this COVID is making everything uncertain, and it has made the things worse for us. But like it has been mentioned by both of you, India has got a lot of strengths. So that is what is standing. And in fact, in the previous crisis and all, whether it was a 2008 crisis or 1997 crisis, India was insulated from the shocks, what we have seen in the world or in Asia. And of course, in 1997, India was not fully integrated into the world economy. But 2008, actually, our Indian economy continued to do well for next 3 years. So, because of the internal issues only, we saw that the Indian economy started going down. But if you look at some of the trends, of course, if you look at the recent trends, according to this CMIE on unemployment, one of the challenges today is that when our Prime Minister took over charge, he said that they are planning to create more than 1 crore of jobs in India, not entirely in the formal sector, but in the informal sector also. So that is one of the major challenges we have, employment, whereas what we have seen, actually the unemployment rate has risen from 5.5 to 13% by, I think, March. Then we also found that 230 million individuals, there was a study conducted by, I think, Mr. Premji Foundation, where they found that 230 million individuals fell below that minimum wage rate per day of 375. So that is what, then one more finding was that in April and May 20, actually poorest of the last 20% of the poorest category, they lost full income. So these are some of the issues which we have. And then Pew Research, which is based in US, they conducted a study and they found that actually there is a shrinking middle class in India. Whereas on the positive side, what we see, actually we have to approach, the government has done a lot of, they have introduced a lot of new initiatives, a lot of programs. So now we have to look at our Indian economy as a turnaround situation, like in a typical corporate. One good thing what has happened in the last 1 year was that generally Indian corporates had a lot of slack in their system, a lot of inefficiencies in their system. But this pandemic has made Indian corporates to look at themselves and see where they had inefficiencies. You will be surprised. We are all surprised actually. When these large companies report their numbers, they have improved their performance substantially. In some cases, the profits have gone up by even 600, 700%. So if you look at what are the strengths of India, we have very good entrepreneurial ecosystem. When I say entrepreneurial, it is not only about the startups. Startups is a new phenomenon, like Dr. Narendra said that more than 52,000 were recognized by government. But even otherwise, India has got the largest number of entrepreneurs in the world. So even a person who is doing a retail or who is doing a sales on the street is also an entrepreneur. So if you look at that way, or even agriculturalist who owns a land is also kind of. So if you see, we have the largest number of entrepreneurs in the world. We have a very good ecosystem. And of course, then, like it was mentioned, there was a good flow of foreign investments. As of today, across the world, more than $20 trillion of funds are earning negative interest rate. So even institutions like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, they have started looking at safe investments at a much better yield. So that is where India has been very, very attractive for these people. Now, all these pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, they all want to come and invest in India. That's a big, big positive. Well, they know that India has got a great potential, so they want. Then we have very large young population. People say demographic dividend, but if you don't find jobs for them, then it is going to be a disaster. But as I said, we have a good entrepreneurial ecosystem. Somehow these people are able to find some jobs. And of course, after pandemic, we saw a lot of jobs being created by companies like Amazon, Flipkart, and all that. Then digitalization. In fact, I was going through a report by, I think, Harvard or Stanford, where they said that India is far ahead in terms of fintech adoption. And some statistics was being given there, where India, we had a transaction of $25 billion last year, China 15 billion, whereas US is only $1.5 billion. Like Dr. Narendra said, the volumes under the UPI is going up substantially. So when the pandemic came, one good thing was that we had a very cheap broadband connection from Geo, and we had a lot of cheaper products, electronic products being imported from China. So if you ask me, these two has enabled, whether it's an individual or as a corporate or an academic institution, we or even banks, it made our lives much easier. So we have a very good digital ecosystem today, of course supported by a good telecom system, and high forex reserves, more than $600 billion. We are the IT capital of the world today, pharma capital of the world today. We have robust automobile industry, and more companies are coming to India. In fact, foreign companies which are based in India are exporting a lot of cars from India. And there is one good thing is competition between states. So there is a very good competition between the states, and each state chief minister behaves like a CEO of a company, and they want to promote the company, and they go out to investors, and they visit other states, they visit other countries, and they tell them what are the investment opportunities, and they invite. So that is going to create a lot of industries. And stock markets are very bullish. So actually, no one would have expected last year. In fact, all of us were thinking that stock markets would go down. Thanks to, of course, the FDI, which came into lands of $25 billion, they got in. After that, we saw that stock markets are very robust. In fact, we were surprised that the amount of money being raised through IPOs this year, and the amount of IPOs which are coming up. Apart from that, the corporates also found new source of finance. One of the reasons why credit offtake from banks is very low is that corporates are, in fact, RBI is also recommending earlier that if large corporates, they want to raise funds, they should try and raise funds, maybe 50 to 70%, not from banking system. They should issue bonds, they can go abroad. So all that was also being suggested by RBI, which will also reduce the risk of NPAs in a big way. So these are all some strengths. This background, what is that we can do to revive the economy? As I said, we have the experience of accelerating the growth rate after 1991. So we know the best practices. I'm happy that in the last 2-3 months, our government is very proactive. One of the latest decisions they made is regarding this removal of retrospective taxation, which is going to build the confidence of foreign investors in a big way. So, Honorable Prime Minister has got an excellent vision about achieving a $5 trillion target. It may not happen the year where we are targeting. Even if it is delayed by 2-3 years, that is fine. Because of the pandemic. So this there are many new programs for development which were introduced by government. The only issue is that we have the programs now. Now, question is that it is a question of implementation, monitoring, and taking course corrective action. And especially in a crisis situation across the world, the one segment in the economy which can do great wonders is government. So we all know that government consumption and private consumption, private sector consumption. So government consumption, of course, government is on the right track, like it was mentioned earlier. This year they have a very large budget for capital expenditure. So instead of asking ministries to cut down on this expenditure, government can tell them that whatever expenditure you planned, you go ahead and spend. So that is one. So government has to step in to spend money. Apart from that, you know, the latest 7th pay commission has come, which has put a lot of money in the hands of government employees. Not only central government, following this, many other governments also have introduced. So this is one segment of population which has not seen reduction in employment, but at the same time, the income levels going up. So this is one segment which can be looked at for stimulating the private consumption. So maybe some incentives can be thought about. Then we are talking about NREGA scheme. NREGA scheme, if you see in the last 2-3 months, actually the amount of demand for this scheme and number of people employed, even though we have a budget of 1,10,000 crores, it was less. So one of the things which we have to ensure is that since many of the people from urban areas have gone to rural areas, so these schemes, whatever has been planned and the budget which has been planned for these schemes, so they can be expedited, the implementation can be expedited. Then public sector, if you come to public sector, people say that they don't do well. Maybe only 50-60 companies or 255-260 companies are doing well. But if you ask me, every central public sector unit, even state PSUs also, most of them have got lot of hidden resources in the form of land, which can be valued very high. I will give you a simple example. A company like MTNL, I believe they have reduced a lot of people, but the value of land they hold is very high. BSNL holds very high. Or Mumbai Port Trust, I believe they own 1/3 of Mumbai land. So like this, most of the public sector units, they have a lot of hidden assets, which can be, of course, the government is doing that in a way. What they are doing is that they are leasing out the operational roads, operational highways. They are leasing out the port terminals. So these funds will be utilized for further development. So the public sector, actually, each public sector unit's valuation, their assets have to be looked into and how they can be capitalized. That can go in a that can go in a big way to help government finances. So we'll talk about finances, as I said, all these development institutions, like we are the largest borrower from World Bank, Asian Development Bank, New Development Bank, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. We are the largest borrower, or International Finance Corporation. So all of them are willing to still lend money to us. So a government should look at all these concessional funding and see how we can attract funds. And for, as I said, even sovereign wealth funds from Abu Dhabi and other places. There are a lot of sovereign wealth funds from Europe. So they all can be tapped for our growth. Then when you come to this Atmanirbhar Bharat, it was discussed, unlike in the case of Make in India program 2014, now there is a focused effort. So I'm sure that it is going to work wonders, the implementation. Then we have these industrial corridors. Industrial corridors, we all started with Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, where Japan has given a big aid. Similar corridors are coming up in 4 or 5 areas, national level, and each state has got 5-6 corridors. So there has to be focus on implementation of these corridors, which will create new industries, new cities, and new employment. And now, I think in the latest annual conference, the Blue Economy Conference, there was a big vision identified for development of blue economy, especially port-based industrial development, as well as building of ships, building of naval ships and all that. Even that can go a big way in creating industries, creating demand for steel, creating employment, and monetizing the deficit. So somehow, I don't know, every economist in the world is suggesting that India should consider monetizing the deficit, and our leaders are very, very conservative in monetizing. So maybe they think that when the worst comes to worst, they could look at that. But my sincere opinion is that we should not delay monetizing the deficit. That will go a big way in kickstarting the growth again. Then excellent coordination between, since there is a crisis situation, in a crisis situation, a turnaround situation, coordination with all the stakeholders are very important. So central government has to play a major role in ensuring coordination. Then, of course, bank lending has to revive. I have just 2 more minutes, sir. Bank lending has to revive now, as it was said that now credit growth is negative. It has to revive. And private sector now, at least 5-6 large groups are showing big interest in large investments. That's a good sign. So many more such companies have to come now. Then last one, this religious institutions and charitable institutions, they have lots of properties. They have lots of revenue. I can give you examples, Tirupati, or even, what is that, in Maharashtra. So these institutions, they own a lot of land, or even if you go to Bhubaneswar, I was told that they own a very huge tract of land. So how these institutions can be roped in to implement all these social development schemes can be looked at by government, and all of them have got money, they have land, they have resources. And I was attending a speech by this ashram, Gujarat. So they are doing a good work in some 50, 100 countries. And I was amazed at the knowledge of the Swamiji, who spoke about the world economy, Indian economy, and what they have done for this COVID. So this is all what I want to share. And I'm sure India has got a very big potential, and we have a visionary leader today at the helm. And whatever programs we have planned for, we have to make sure that implementation is very effective, monitoring is being done, and there is a course corrective action at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kannan. What you mentioned, you have given both the sides. First, you said the unemployment in India, because our Honorable Prime Minister has promised for 2 crores jobs every year, but the actuality is totally different, and there is an increase in the unemployment in India. Everybody knows that. And you also mentioned that 230 million are the people are below minimum wages today in the country, and many lost total income. So it shows that the figures or facts, what has been told by the earlier speaker, our Dr. Narendra, as well as you have also mentioned, as well as the government claims, the facts are showing some different aspects, that the conditions, and according to Mr. Kannan, even the middle class is suffering the most. So it shows that what is happening, only the top corporates are minting money, they are raising the funds. That's why the stock exchange is bullish right now, as Mr. Kannan's mentioned, that the stock exchange is bullish. This is because of only those corporates who are doing well because of the pandemic, because of those things which we required during the pandemic. But he says there is we have a very entrepreneurship skills from the very beginning, and we have a very good ecosystem. He says that digitalization, although he says that digitalization, we have gone up like anything, but still we know there is a digital divide. 70% of the public in India resides in rural. And yesterday only I did a program on rural versus urban. And in that, the implementation, the infrastructure in rural is still way behind what we talk and what we see in other big cities. He says UPI volume has going up because physically nobody is going out. So no one has any other option just to use the online payments. More companies are coming to India. According to Mr. Kannan, he says there is a very good competition among the states. They are competing, but in fact, they are competing for wants of vaccine and how to hide the oxygen deaths, which everybody says not a single oxygen death, which is very, very unfortunate. But this is a competition among all the chief ministers. They are acting as a CEO. So, and He also mentioned about the 7th Pay Commission, Manrega. These all the things are doing well because the money is pumped in. Public sectors, he says the public sectors is having a land bank, and he mentioned about MTNL, BSNL, Port Trust of India. And he wants that the land should be, and he mentioned that the lands are now being privatized in many places and leased. So according to him, which I cannot vouch, because my views are, a person, if anybody wants to sell his property only when the crisis is there, the economy is not good. But according to Mr. Kannan, this is a good thing. One should, what the government is doing, it is a very positive aspect. So he says there, even he says there are lots of money with the religious institutions. He's mentioned about Tirupati. He also mentioned about the Siddhi Vinayak as well as the Shirdi temple in Maharashtra. And he says they have lots of lands. So he wants to monetize that land, that how they either monetize or they should use that money for the public welfare. And he also mentioned that those borrowers, India is the largest borrower, foreign borrower. So this, according to him, this is a positive sign, and he gives credits to our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. But when I will come in the next round, definitely I'm going to ask this question on him, whether borrowing is a positive sign, whether privatization of our own assets or selling our assets is a positive sign, whether few only corporates are enriched, minting money is a positive sign, wiping off the middle class, wiping off the poor, and making them more below the poverty line is a positive sign or not, which I will come in the next round. I will definitely ask this question to see whether really the Indian economy is reviving, or it is only on the papers, or only on the for the media purpose, so that the public should not lose the confidence. Thank you very much, Mr. Kannan, for giving your views. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and she is Miss Nirupama Soundarajan. Miss Nirupama is the Chief Executive Officer of Pehel India Foundation. She started her research career with the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER, where she co-authored the book titled Retail in India in July 2009, published by Academic Foundation. She has worked extensively on the impact of organized retail on farmers. At Pehel India Foundation, she undertakes policy research in the financial sector, commodities, gold ecosystem, retail and e-commerce, housing and housing finance, and ease of doing business. Prior to Pehel India Foundation, she worked as additional director and team lead for the financial sector division at the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, where she was the lead author on the landmark report on why India needs a gold policy. She also worked as Assistant General Manager Economist in the Department of Strategy and Economic Intelligence with Bank of India Head Office, Mumbai. She obtained an MSc in Financial Economics and MBA Finance from Cardiff University, UK, and a postgraduate diploma in Finance and Financial Law from Center for Financial and Management Studies, University of London. Welcome, Ms. Nirupama Soundarajan, on our show. Ms. Nirupama, you have heard our both panelists, Dr. M. Narendra as well as Mr. R. Kannan. Now, they have given their views and they are very positive. This is the Indian economy. Dr. Narendra is very positive, and he says that Indian economy is on a right track, on a reviving path, and Indian economy is reviving nicely. But what Mr. Kannan has mentioned, giving both the sides, but he is also very positive as far as the Indian economy is concerned, revival of Indian economy is concerned. Now, we would like to know from your view, so reviving Indian economy. Ms. Nirupama Soundarajan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. So let me actually start by a very direct answer to you. Are we on a recovery mode today? No, we are not on a recovery mode today. Will we get on a recovery mode? Of course, we will get on a recovery mode. So the point is that recovery, of course, will happen. It's a question of when, and it's a question of how. Not to take away from anything that Mr. Narendra or Mr. Kannan have said, because those are facts and they are both right in their optimism, and we should be optimistic in terms of how we see the Indian economy going. However, we should also have a very realistic appraisal in terms of where we stand now and what is going to happen over the next couple of years. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. Mr. Kannan already highlighted that unemployment is a huge problem, and we do have a problem. We also need to remember that COVID, while has accentuated the decline in the economy, the decline was happening even pre-COVID. We were having a slightly tough time in terms of economic growth before COVID even struck us, and with COVID, it has become much worse. COVID alone has according to CMI, COVID alone has accounted for more than 10 million jobs lost. That's a huge number. And we also need to recognize the fact that there has been a huge amount of wealth erosion that has happened during these times. Now, for anybody to recover, if we go going by even pure growth rates, we should also remember growth rate is calculated on a base. So no matter what your IMF and your World Bank and Moody's peg your growth rate at, which is currently, I think they've pegged it at 9.8% or thereabouts. It is only to say that from a low base that we are at, we will go back, which means we will probably get back to our pre-COVID levels. But pre-COVID levels were not kosher as well. We still had a problem there. We have other aspects also to take into consideration. Of course, employment is a problem. I don't want to touch upon employment at this point because Mr. Kannan spoke in great detail about what we need to do about employment. Let me come to 2 or 3 other points. The first is fiscal deficit. Currently, India has a fiscal deficit. As of your last budget, we are sitting on a fiscal deficit of 9.3%. It is immensely huge. It is understandable because the circumstances are extenuating. So therefore, a fiscal deficit of this size is understandable. However, after the, from 2014 till pretty much a pre-COVID era in 2019, the government had worked very hard in reducing our fiscal deficit to almost a 3.5% from where it was. It is not an easy task. Now, from its 9.3%, and given the fact that the economy needs fiscal stimuli at various sectors, there is a chance that it may not be able to control it. It may not increase, but it may not decrease either for the next couple of years. Is this a good thing or a bad thing is up for debate. Personally, given the fact that the circumstances demand government spending, maybe it is all right. However, it is post-COVID era where the economy starts recovering that the fiscal deficit will start actually playing a very, very huge role as far as economic growth is concerned. Because this number, while we can justify it in current circumstance, is not a healthy number to have. We need to take cognizance of that. Secondly, external borrowings have also been going up. So there is a problem there for India as well. There are many macro indicators today that we can justify because of COVID, but which we need to be cognizant of and be aware of only because of the fact that when recovery starts, these may actually come back to bite us. And we need to keep track of these numbers. The third aspect that I want to look at is also NPAs. Now, while Mr. Narendra was absolutely right in saying that NPAs in terms of has come down as of our previous figure in terms of 2021, there is also data as per the financial stability report of RBI to say that by 2022, the gross NPA ratio would go up to 9.8% from about a 7.4%. This is because in the second wave, there has been a lot of economic damage that has happened, probably more than the first wave even. The MSME sector, which is a backbone of an Indian economy because we have a lot of small businesses and small entrepreneurs, has been affected very, very deeply by the COVID crisis and by any kind of decline. There is a problem in terms of working capital requirement. There is a problem in terms of not being able to expand business, and their recovery is not as robust as maybe your large corporate sectors has been. There has also been a lot of unemployment and closing of businesses that has happened in this MSME sector. Bank credit, and as Mr. Kannan very rightly said, bank credit has been negative, and there is a reason for it because banks also, even if it is not exhibited in numbers in terms of NPAs, there is a lot of worry that because of COVID and especially the second wave, that NPAs will increase as far as some of these sectors are concerned, especially with the MSME sector, because let us face it, with wealth erosion that has happened, people are finding it difficult to pay back loans, understandably. But there is a problem. So when this happens, bank credit tends to slow down, and bank credit will not actually work even in terms of funding capacity expansion or in terms of working capital requirement. It kind of puts an additional stress, because for most of institutions, and especially in a country like India, we tend to rely very heavily on the banking sector to fund our growth. There is an inherent problem with that, because that puts an immense amount of pressure on just the banking community, which is unfair to them. As Mr. Kannan also was talking about how the capital markets have actually grown during the COVID crisis, there is a problem there that we need to recognize. This means that the market is acting independently. It can be for two reasons. The market is acting independently of how your economic fundamentals are actually working, which is a problem. The market should technically reflect the fundamentals of the economy. It is not in this case, which means it is being driven by sentiment. It is being driven by speculation. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it can send wrong signals, so to speak. There have been quite a few IPOs, which I think is a very good thing, because I think we need to look to our capital markets more in terms of raising capital, and capital markets should lead to capital formation, which we have not been doing in the past. We have to move away from the banking sector and look at other sources of funding our growth. So therefore, turning to capital markets makes sense. And if we are able to do this, it is excellent via the capital market, whether it's in terms of bonds, whether it's in terms of IPOs, it is a good start for us. And we should kind of push towards that. We should encourage more listings. We should encourage more businesses to kind of come online and raise money through the capital markets. Let me come to a third point which I want to make, which is about our disinvestment policy. Now, we know, given the fact, and I'm going to link this to a fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit means what? At the end of the day, you are printing notes which don't have a backing. And therefore, at some point, if you need to fund your fiscal deficit, you need to raise a lot of money. The way this has been done in the past has been through auctions of your, let's say, your 2G, 3G, 4G, all of that. And hopefully the 5G auction, when it happens, will raise certain amount of revenue for the government. But it has also been done by divesting your government holding from various public sector enterprises. Now, unfortunately, and we need to keep in mind, while I'm a very strong advocate of disinvestment, and I think the government should actually draw up a proper plan in terms of where it wants to stay in business, because the government needs to understand whether it is an investor, whether it is in management, or whether it is a shareholder in the businesses that it holds. You can't be all three, because if you are all three, there is a conflict of interest that inherently arises. Temasek from Singapore is a government enterprise, and they are run very, very efficiently. So this is not to say that government enterprises cannot be run efficiently. Of course, they can be run efficiently, but it has to be then run like a proper, for a lack of a better phrase, private sector entity, if you may, or a proper way of running management, instead of actually using it as a way to discharge your social functions. It has to be run like an industry and not as a vehicle for running your social, incentives or your social objectives. But with disinvestment, our inherent problem is this. Most of our public sector enterprises, the profitable ones, we want to hold on to and we don't want to divest. But it is mostly the ones which are not profitable that we want to kind of divest, privatize, or at least reduce strategic shareholding. What is the problem in this? Why would anybody want to buy shares in a company that has no economic value? We need to understand that. We first need to look at a way to create economic value for a lot of our public sector enterprises that currently have no value. How that can be done? There are many suggestions that are there, and there are many discussions. Look at what has been happening with Air India. Air India as a airline has actually been abused by policymakers because it has been catering to everybody's demand in terms of free tickets, in terms of everything, which has resulted in the kind of loss that is making today. The biggest problem, I mean, when Indian Airlines and Air India was merged, that was one of the biggest mistakes that the government did. There is also enough evidence to show that every profitable route of Air India at one point was stripped down and handed over to private sector in the attempt to grow it. So the abuse to public sector enterprises has come largely from policymakers themselves, because they have been using it as a way to discharge what they believe as social objectives, rather than running it as a business that it should be run as. And as a result, there has been such value erosion that today, when you want to even divest, there is no demand. Until very recently, every time a public sector enterprise had its IPO and it didn't meet its demand, you literally forced LIC to come in and pick up the, whatever the slack was. Now, LIC, much like how RBI became the lender of, is considered the lender of last resort as the central bank, LIC literally became the investor of last resort. And that has compromised LIC's own position. And at the end of the day, if one public sector is, and what did public sector divestment mean? That you wanted to get shareholding out of the government's control into private sector or into retail. And instead, what was happening? You were literally getting, it was literally a left hand passing something to the right hand, because LIC is also a government enterprise. So it was an incredibly welcome move when the government announced that, when it says that it is going to reduce its shareholding in terms of divestment, and when it wants to actually reduce its shareholding in public sector enterprises, it meant both direct and indirect, which means that you were protecting LIC and you were making sure that it wasn't a question of if you're listing HAL and nobody was actually had any demand for the Hindustan Aeronautic Limited's share, that you would not force LIC to buy, because at the end, the government still then has a stake in the same thing. And this happened. 75% of HAL's stocks were picked up at the end by LIC. And why that is there, nobody knows, because obviously there was a pressure for them to do so. I think going forward, India needs to look at 2 or 3 things very seriously. One is that we need to, given the fact that we have agriculture, manufacturing, and services, and we have been for a very long time a services-led economy, I think we need to first embrace that. It is a rather unpopular opinion that I have when I say that while India needs to concentrate on manufacturing, I think we are not doing it in the right sectors. We have to be honest and accept that we have lost competitiveness as far as mass manufacturing is concerned, whether it is textiles, whether it is in certain other areas, and we have lost it to our South Asian peers. And it is very evident because when US-China trade wars happened and industries were moving and factories were moving out of China, India couldn't attract them for various reasons. They went to South Asia, they went to a Vietnam, they went to a Laos, they went to a Thailand, they went to a Malaysia or an Indonesia. They did not come to India. We need to actually sit down and think about why that happened. This happened for maybe 2 or 3 reasons. One, it is actually not easy to do business in India. Because while we may stand 63 on our ease of doing business indicators, and while we may actually be improving on it from 100 to 77 to now currently 63, forgive me, it does not actually reflect how everyday ease of doing business is. Contract enforceability, we rank one of the lowest, which means that if you get into a contract and someone reneges on your contract, in order to enforce that contract is a problem. Starting a business, closing a business continues to be a problem. But the biggest problem in India is actually staying in business. There are too many regulations. There is too many approvals. They are not necessarily time bound. And you need to, it is a constant struggle for any business, forget starting or closing, but just to stay in business. And we have not been doing a good job because there is always the threat of retrospective regulations that can affect how you do business. For example, Look at what happened to the when Galwan happened between India and China, and there was this immediate reaction of banning apps, and therefore saying that all of you get out of the country, Chinese apps. I understand why we did that. We had to react economically. But what sometimes we forget is, and this is the same thing in terms of Mr. Piyush Goel's outright war cry against Amazon and Flipkart, as well as far as the e-commerce companies are concerned. Now, there is a case going on. CCI is investigating them to see whether they are adopting unfair trade practices. By all means, they have every right to do. And if there is a problem, CCI should reprimand them. However, while that is happening, Mr. Piyush Goel, in my opinion, should not actually go on the offensive saying that large e-commerce companies are detrimental to Indian economy. When you send signals like that in Parliament and everywhere else, and you take such a hard-nosed stand against people who have been actually investing in your country and creating jobs, it sends a very wrong signal as far as foreign direct investment is concerned. Why would any company want to come and invest in India? You have every right as a nation to put whatever restrictions you want, whatever conditions you want at the time of entry. You can tell Amazon or a Flipkart or a Walmart or whomever it is that is coming into the country at the time of entry, you can tell them, these are my conditions. Either you follow them and enter the country or you don't come in. But once the company has come in, has invested, has created jobs, has integrated itself in such a great manner with the Indian economy, if you are then not going to give it national treatment and discriminate against it and create an unlevel playing field, other companies will not come in. They will not come in because it doesn't allow for a stable regulatory environment to stay in business. This is a problem. This is a very huge problem. And we need to actually take cognizance of this.
Yeah, it's a time.
Yes, I'm wrapping up. So I think for India, I'm just a second. So I think for India, in terms of recovery and going forward, we have to keep in mind 2 or 3 things. Apart from the fact that no matter what your macroeconomics may be, one is our financial sector needs to be strengthened a lot more. Our dependence on banks has to reduce, and we have to look at other avenues for funding. Because without the financial sector, you cannot fund growth. 2, we have to take ease of doing business seriously, which means it's not just starting and closing, it is about staying in business. 3, we have to be very serious about how we treat foreign companies that are in India. You cannot keep imposing retrospective rules. And while it is important to protect your domestic industry, you also have to take cognizance of the fact that when foreign industry comes here, it is not that everything gets repatriated. They are creating jobs, they are investing. So we have to take cognizance and allow them that national treatment once they come. Without this, you're not going to get your FDI. You're not going to be on a recovery path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because of the paucity of time, I would not like to summarize what Ms. Nirupama has said, but she is very, very clear. Whatsoever has been shown or projected is not what is happening in reality. Okay, now time is short, so I want only 30-second answers if I will try to excuse. Okay, my first question goes to Dr. Narendra. Dr. Narendra, in other countries, we have seen that instead of giving the priority to the industry, the other countries have put the money directly to the consumer, and that the demand was created. Today, the condition in India is that only the industries are getting whatsoever relief from the government, not the consumer. When there is no demand, how the industries also function? What you say about this? 30 seconds only, please.
Goelji, that we can understand that the cash component of the whatever direct benefit transfer should be higher during the crisis period so that the people will spend. But one thing is certain, even that part being more also, today the people are not likely to spend because they have to conserve the money for their health expenditure because there is uncertainty. So the current consumption per se getting lower is not merely due to that they don't possess money, but your point is correct that the around 10% of the population controls around 50% of our Indian wealth. Now, if you see the food grain itself, food grain,
Dr.
I'm just telling 1 minute, food grain Food grain, government even up to November, they are spending around 1,30,000 wheat and rice free to the 5 kg each, free to the people. Then other money also, like farmers, they are getting 6,000 rupees per year. So there is that, but I can understand that still more need to be done, which government is willing to do as and when the need arises.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Narayan. Mr. Kannan, you mentioned about very gloomy, very nice picture about the Indian economy. But when we are not vaccinated, our rate of vaccination is far less. Definitely the third wave is knocking now. And we know what is the condition happening in Kerala and other places. If we are not going to be vaccinated, how you think what we are talking here about all these good pictures are in reality? 20 seconds only to you now. Mr. Kannan, are you there?
Yeah,
So now there are many new companies were allowed by Indian government now.
But too late.
It may be too late, but now we are talking about single dose also. So I'm sure that the supplies will increase now fast, and it will be done faster. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nirupama, what do you think? Policies are good, made in a very cozy environment, but implementation is really poor. What do you say about this?
I agree completely. I think we need to focus on implementation and keep the objective of policy in mind and review it regularly as well. We don't review. I think we need to review to make sure that implementation is in line with the objective that we set out with.
Okay, thank you very much. So, viewers, you have seen today, all our experts are very positive. At least two experts have made very positive aspects that the Indian economy is reviving. But the real, sorry, please. The reality is what we are seeing. That reality is still far because so many things have to be done. So we have to say, because the time is short. So thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon se, Samvad Sarokar News, or as well as it was shown live on Bharat Post News, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor is to bring to in the evening program of Kal Aaj aur Kal Lal Goel Ke Sang every day a guest who is an achiever. And today's my chief guest is Dr. Ajit Raizada, IAS, former State Election Commissioner of Madhya Pradesh. So please tune in for Kal Aaj aur Kal Lal Goel Ke Sang at 4:30 p.m. Thank you very much, Dr. M. Naren. Thank you very much, Mr. R. Kannan. And thank you very much, Ms. Nirupama Soundarajan. And thank you all the viewers for joining us, for watching our shows. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And unless we talk positive,